Lights, camera, action.
In a studio where local filmmakers talk to other filmmakers about the inside world of film.
Cut.
That's not the script. It. We'll fix it in post. Do you wonder how films are produced and what really goes on behind the scenes? Well, stand by. Filmmakers Kevin Mumphrey, Victoria V.A. Jones, and Carson Hype Ferguson explain all the details. Right here on It, We Will Fix It in Post podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Whenever you're listening, I thank you for doing so. I am once again Kevin Mumphrey, and this is Fix It in Post. I have my colleagues once again, Karsten Hyde Ferguson.
Yeah.
And Victoria V.A. Jones.
What's going on?
Today, we're talking about the documentary film Abandoned, and we have Nick Gray, the producer, director, and Crystal C. Romero. Now, would you like to say your participation in this film as well?
Oh, I'm the director of marketing.
Oh, right. Now, you both have had a time in military. So, Nick, I'll start off with you. Talk about your time in the military.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for being with me here today. Appreciate it. So, my experience in the military was roughly 4 years in the United States Army. I got out as a non-commissioned officer, did a couple of tours overseas. The major one was in Baghdad, Iraq between 06 to 07, so basically during the surge. And predominantly what we did was night ops, recon, pretty much anything that was under the sun at the time that was the needs of the military. It's probably the best way to put it. But primarily my job was to not be seen by the enemy. So if I was seen by the enemy, if I engaged in the enemy, I wasn't doing my job right.
All right. Now, Crystal, talk about your time in the military.
I served for 16 years, 3 months. I was medically retired in 2014 as a master sergeant. And I worked in various different positions. I held 4 military occupational specialties. I started in logistics, and then from logistics, I went to public affairs, where I was a photojournalist for a couple years, and then from there, I went on into operations, and I worked in weapons of mass destruction, primarily Homeland Security. And my last 4 years in, I was a senior human resources sergeant, and I also managed the substance abuse program and drug testing program.
Wait, did you mention what branch?
The Army.
Okay. Just make sure.
So, and Carson, you Air Force, right?
Yeah, I was in Air Force.
So you have a lot of military in
Thank
the
you for
room.
your service.
Yeah, thank you. Like you did.
Thank all y'all for y'all service.
I did nothing. So, feel like a loser right now. Thank you all.
Oh my God.
I think I've touched the gun maybe 4 times in my lifetime, but I wanted you all to bring it up just so you can the audience can have an understanding of the experience that you all have within military. So, what was the genesis of the film Abandoned?
Yeah, so roughly 2 years ago, I was asked to become the CEO of an organization called USJAG. And what USJAG does is that they conduct forensic investigations inside the Department of Defense to ensure that both policy and procedure are being followed when injured active duty service members are going through a medical board proceeding. So they come back from war, they're injured, and the attempt is that they should be medically discharged, medically retired. But the issue is that a lot of these men and women who should be medically retired is the exact opposite is happening to them, and they're being less than honorably discharged or other than honorably discharged. And what that means is that they're injured, and if they are given a less than honorable discharge, then they're stripped of all of their benefits, their honor, and their dignity. So they effectively become no longer the Department of Defense's problem, and now become their community's problem. And they eat up scarce resources. So what we do is that we intercede prior to that discharge becoming official, and we conduct forensic investigations to make sure both policy and procedure are being followed. And we interview doctors, commanders, family members, soldiers, all across the board. And then what we'll do is we'll put together a summary, or in some cases a rebuttal, that is submitted to the Department of Defense. In some cases, actually is elevated to the Secretary of Defense in some cases. So the impact that we've had over the last 15 years with the organization's been around is we've worked with Congress to pass certain pieces of legislation. Overall, we've had an influential impact on over 50,000 service members, not to include their families. We've directly interceded on nearly 400 cases and successfully won those battles. And that has resulted in over $500 million in lifetime benefits being secured for these service members and their families. So, with that being said, when I took over the organization 2 years ago, what I was really trying to get an understanding of was the why, how, what. So number one is, why is the DoD doing this to these injured service members? Number two is, how are they doing it? And what I mean by how are they doing it, how are they defying the laws of Congress that have been bestowed upon them? How are they not following the laws? And how are they continuing to do these abusive discharge practices? And then the last thing was the what, which is, what are they doing to individuals who speak up? Because one of the biggest things that I was asking myself was, well, if all of this is happening, why doesn't anybody speak up? And the short answer to that question was, people are speaking up, but when they do speak up, you can call them whistleblowers in some cases, bad things happen to them. And those bad things can be small, and those bad things can be bad. So, with that being said, when I was able to collect all of the data through about a 6-month audit that I conducted with the organization, going through past case files, speaking with current clients, speaking with our confidential informants that we have inside the Department of Defense that do feed us intel. When I got done with all of that, I truly felt as if I just got done reading a spy novel. It was disturbing. And one of the things that the confidential informants told me is that the only way for this to stop from happening is for third-party oversight to be established over the entire discharge process in the Department of Defense. Now, the only way for that to happen is going to be through congressional action. Now, the unfortunate thing is that Congress will not willingly pass this type of legislation because they will get major pushback from not only the Department of Defense, but also from defense contractors. And the reason as to why defense contractors are so important in this equation is because if you look at the makeup of the Armed Services Committee of both the House and the Senate, their primary donors, lo and behold, are defense contractors. All right. So the question then becomes, how do we get Congress to do something that they don't want to do, even though it's the right thing? And that's going to be through public pressure. Public pressure for them fearing that they're going to lose their jobs. Now, the only way for public pressure to happen is going to be through public awareness. All right. So at that point in time, we had a lot of options to consider about how do we inform the American people. And there's a lot of different ways to go about that. And so we started out just toying around with an idea of doing a 5-minute explainer video, and then quickly realized that that just wasn't going to be good enough, because really at that point, what you're doing is you're just telling people about, in this case, US JAG and what we do. But the reality is that you can't tell people things anymore. You have to show them. And the best way for us to be able to show people as to what is happening is going to be through testimonials of our past clients, testimonials of the confidential informants that we work with inside of the Department of Defense, testimonials from journalists that have followed us over the past 15 years. And so that's really how it all started. And so it morphed from a little 5-minute video to something that was going to be a little bit bigger, maybe 15 minutes, going to bring in some more past clients. And we just kept starting writing scripts, and it kept, getting different variations of the script. And a lot of the reasons to why the script kept changing is because of events that were taking place, not only with cases that we were receiving, but also other events that took place on a global scale. And the biggest one is obviously the most recent, about a year ago, was the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And there's a lot of how do you classify it? There's a lot of opinions as to why it was conducted in that manner. But the reality is that it was a disaster. If anybody's to sit there and tell you that it was a successful mission, doesn't know what they're talking about, because it was bad. So when that happened, that really started to get the script in line with what we needed to do. And then the last thing that took place that solidified the script itself was when Russia and Ukraine kicked off, and then all of a sudden the United States, less than 6 months from getting out of the longest war in the history of this country, once again finds itself entangled in a proxy war. And that is really the culmination of how we got from a 5-minute little video to a full-length documentary. Because the reality is that there's just so much information that needs to be told, because it's a very complicated topic and a very complicated problem to explain, and it cannot be done in 5 minutes.
Okay. So now, Crystal, how did you get yourself involved in this project?
Well, as you know, I've been appealing my medical discharge for going on 10 years now. 8 years now. And about, I want to say a little more than 6 months ago, I was at FedEx making copies of my case file, which is about 1,600 pages. And I get to the copy machine, and I'm looking at the little copy machine, like the instructions, and it says 15 cents a copy. And I'm just like, this is gonna cost me like freaking $900. Like, this is so. I had a full-blown panic attack in FedEx. Like, I was so overwhelmed with emotion, because I was like, damn, just to submit my packet's gonna cost me $800, because they only want it, they wanted it digital. So anyway, I just gathered all my stuff and I went to my car, because I was like, I'm not gonna pay this money. Like, this is crazy. So I called up a very good friend of mine. He's like, I need to connect you with him. He's like, he literally helps people like you. Of course, now I'm already out. So Nic, in my situation, actually couldn't represent him. In fact, I think I'm the only client that you have, Nic. Am I correct? That's already discharged?
Correct. Yeah. That's active. Yes.
Yeah. So I got connected with Nic immediately when I started talking to him and telling him my story with everything that I was saying. It was like, yep, I believe you. Yep, that sounds about right. Yep, I believe it. And we were both just having this Me Too movement or moment, both of us. And it was like, I was treated this way when I came forward. I was treated this way when I spoke up. In my situation, I was in charge of a drug testing program, so I would get soldiers all the time, and I managed a joint program, so I had Air Force and Army. I'd have people coming to me all the time saying that they had turned to drugs and alcohol for X, Y, and Z. I mean, everything under the sun. We're people, so we have alcoholism and drug problems and all kinds of problems, just like everybody else. So I'd get people coming to me all the time. And in one situation, I had a young lady who had been assaulted, and she had turned to heroin and methamphetamines to cope with her assault. And so I was having problems with just a coworker of mine that was not doing her job, which was to get this service member into therapy and into rehab. And that's like literally where the whole thing started. But anyway, I go to Nick now and I'm telling him my story, and he's just like, man, I wish, we would have met back when you were still on active duty, because I probably would have been able to do more. But in fact, what it did is Nick and I developed this professional relationship, kind of tag teaming this problem together. He's like, hey, well, I'm working on something, pretty big, and it sounds like you and I have like something in common here. And even though he did less time than me, it honestly doesn't matter the time, because whether you served for 4 years or, in my treat us is all the same, and that's expendable. They treat us like we are expendable. They do not treat us like human beings. And when I say they, I'm talking about senior leadership. And that's in a nutshell how Nick and I came together. But I also believe in the universe, and I'm like, we came together for a reason, because he has a very valid claim and a very valid point that he's trying to make. And being that I lived it, I can, be there to co-sign and be like, yeah, he's absolutely right. This is the way they treat you. What the system is doing is criminalizing our mental health. For example, in Nick's situation, and in mine too, we had mental health issues, and we were like, okay, I need to get some help. And I got told, oh, well, you've got mental health issues, we don't want you no more. And I'm like, I have mental health issues because of you. It's like, it's our reactions to their disrespect is what's getting us, a target put on our back, and then we get discharged, and then we lose all our benefits. And in my case, I lost my retirement. So for me, to give 16, it's a pretty steep fall from 16 plus years of military grace to just walk away with nothing. And all because, I made somebody's daughter cry. I mean, it's sad. Mm. There's no protections for us. And what Nick is doing is he's bringing in a serious light to an injustice.
All right. Now, sorry. Nick, when you kind of decided to make this more long form, did you, now, was it because you had so many people that was willing to do testimonials, or did you have to go out and find more people?
No. So, I mean, from a long form perspective and how, it transitioned to that, there is no shortage of people that are willing to come forward and tell their stories, at least at the very least from the past clients of USJAG. There's about 400 of them. We don't stay in contact with some of them. Unfortunately, some of them have already they're dead because they committed suicide. We may have won the battle for them, but they lost the battle anyways. It's pretty sad. But there's absolutely no shortage of people coming forward wanting to speak. I think the main reason as to why it really morphed from a 5-minute project into something an hour to an hour and a half, whatever it may be, is because the problem itself is so complicated. It's so complicated, and if you try to shell it or tell it in a short version, it almost becomes unbelievable, and people just don't buy it. They just don't believe that these types of things are happening. And like I said earlier, is that in this day and age, you can't just tell people what is going on. You have to show them. And in many cases, it's showing people via testimonials, showing via firsthand accounts, showing people via data, all of those things. And in order to be able to convey all of that, we definitely needed more than 5 minutes.
Okay, now you kind of certain documents they have the testimonies and they have like maybe the reenactments with it. Is that something you're looking to do as well? So
as far as reenactments go, that's a great question, because we're going into our second round of filming here towards the end of the year, because this thing's going to be released next year. Reenactments haven't really been something that have been brought up as far as doing that. One thing that we'll be using quite a bit of, though, is B-roll. There's also footage from a lot of our past clients when they were actually serving overseas, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, the Horn of Africa, things of that nature. One thing I'll say is that there is not a shortage of content to be used in this. That is for sure.
Okay, now y'all looking to have the same impact as a like the Vietnam War, when they would show pictures and stuff like that? Is that kind of the impact you're looking to give to like the general public per se?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different things that we're shooting for with our direction on this. Obviously informing people is the main priority. It's really explaining to people as to what is going on. But to your point, you just brought up past wars and whatnot, is that this is not just isolated to the global war on terror. This goes back to the Vietnam War or conflict, however you want to classify it. That's really where the problem started, with soldiers and Marines and service members in general having major issues. And there's a very good reason for that. Actually, there's two main reasons for that. Number one is that if you go back to the Korean War, World War II, things of that nature, the way that they came back from a theater was on a boat. And that boat journey was about 3 weeks. So it really allowed them time to decompress in many cases, whether they had injuries or non-injuries. Starting in Vietnam to present day, you're in the battlefield, and in some cases 2 or 3 days later, you're sitting on the couch in your living room. There is no time to decompress. Case in point, when I came back, we had just gotten our vehicles out of the lot, and 2 days prior to that, I was in a war zone. But we were driving down the main road on the base, and there was a funeral detail that was practicing. So they have their M4s, and they're firing them off, blank rounds, obviously. But right as our car was passing that formation, they fired those rounds, and everybody in the vehicle flipped the fuck out. And I swerved to the center of the road. People in the back of their car were saying, contact left, contact left. And that was probably one of the most surreal moments that I had, just being back only a few days, but also understanding as to how much of an impact, being in a war zone for a year, took on me. And I thought that I was doing pretty well. Yeah.
So with your testimonials, were you able to put everybody in for the film, or did you have to pick and choose who you going to tell, whose story you were going to tell as far as it was concerned?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as you all know, with filmmaking and so forth, and this is something that I'm learning right now. I haven't produced films before, and so I'm learning on the fly. Luckily, I have a really good studio out of Toronto that just incredible people are doing this basically for free because they feel it's the right thing to do. So what we have is a handful of different testimonials that are out there who are past clients of ours, and one is going to be chosen to be the spine, and so we're still reworking all of that. Going to be the spine, and then we have the other characters that are being followed as well. But with that being said, we will also be able to create more or less a waterfall montage as well, as we'll be able to use that for marketing purposes in the film, could be at the end. So there's a lot of content to work with. And I think, one of the things that we're just making sure is that we get this right, but we also have the flexibility to pivot, because every day we get new cases. We just got one case, it was about 6 months ago actually, And our forensic investigations took us back to Syria in 2017, and it involved the Marine Corps. And it involved the Marine Corps breaking their own policies and procedures, which effectively broke hundreds of Marines. And when those Marines redeployed back to the States after their tour over there, they started having a huge spike in suicides, a huge spike in domestic violence, a huge spike in homicides. And so it's those types of cases that come to us as to where it's like another layer of the onion that gets peeled. And it adds more complexity to the overall story. So, there's that variable, which is internal, which is why we need to be very flexible with what the end product is going to look like. But then there's the external variables, case in point, Russia, Ukraine, the fall of Afghanistan, things of that nature. It's all tied together. So, what we envision being the final product today, I can most definitely tell you is not going to be the finished product when it does release. But the good thing is that we're very nimble, have a lot of content, and a great director out of Toronto. He's incredible, very creative. And so that's where things sit right now.
Now, this is, and I guess you both can chime in on this, again, your first film project. So what have you both have learned and during the process of making this film as a new filmmaker, per se?
Oh, my Lord. Yeah. So
we've all said that.
Yeah, I know, kidding. So it's pretty, so I would say first off is that I have a huge passion for this. I'm having a lot of fun. It's an emotional roller coaster, but I'm having a lot of fun. And I could actually see myself doing this, for the rest of my life in some capacity. Obviously, I need to focus on US JAG and making sure that we get stood up, for long-term success and things of that nature. But the one thing that I have truly discovered is, number one, I enjoy it, but number two is that what I think is going to be a good script or a good narrative, all of that, and then what the director feels things should be, in many cases are complete polar opposites. But the good thing in this situation is that I'm able to give a lot of visual examples to the director, and he's able to take those visuals and through our conversations as well and put something together that actually makes sense. So when I wrote the first script and the music that I had as far as the soundtrack, I had it all in my head. I was thinking, man, this is amazing, and it's gonna be all choreographed. And so I gave it to the director in the studio, and then they come back with the first cut, and it was the exact opposite as to what I envisioned. And I'm sitting here, and my initial thought was, what the fuck, dude? You destroyed my baby. And then, there's definitely egos involved, as you guys know, and so you're very close to your projects. But I sat on it for a second, and I watched it again, and I watched it again, and then it hit me as, number one, he's the professional, not me. Number two, it's his job to be the creative individual. It's my job to be the business side of it. But at the same time, also feeding him the information that he needs in order to be able to put together a solid product. So it's been interesting for sure. But that was probably my biggest takeaway, is that I don't know a damn thing.
It's hard, having to collab with somebody and you have a vision and the other person have a vision, and then y'all got to work together to make sure the vision, comes out the way that the both of you want it to be. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Without killing each other.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
And then even along our journeys, like working with other filmmakers, if you're not on the same page, obviously because you have your own background and understanding of things, to be able to articulate what you need to the other person in a way where they receive it,
right,
and actually comes out, somewhat legible to what you were thinking is it's kind of special, honestly. It really is.
It is a special.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something there. I mean, you got to. I think it all comes to communication, and you've got to be able to find a way to communicate in a manner as to where somebody understands it. And I think that goes back to leadership, though. In general, is you got to to be a good leader, you have to be able to communicate on an individual level.
Yes,
Right.
But that was for me, and that's one thing that I discovered as to my relationship with the director was how he best receives feedback and how I best convey what I'm thinking is not in written form, but is in visual form. And it can be as simple as, just finding different movies that are out there, different documentaries, different scenes, or just different raw footage of, wars in Afghanistan or in Iraq or, World War II or Vietnam, whatever it may be. And that's when I started just pulling a bunch of stuff up and saying, hey, Josh, this is what I'm thinking here. This is what I'm thinking here. Take a look at this. And he goes, just keep sending it at me. This is great. This is working out well. And I'll get something put together. And then obviously we know what he put together was absolutely the exact opposite as to what I was thinking. But I will say that he nailed it. He's done a hell of a job for sure.
Now, Crystal, how's your venture in the world of film been for you?
It's been hell, dude. It's crazy.
Thank you for your honesty.
I won't even lie. Yeah, this shit is it's crazy. So I've been working on a project for 2 years now, and I kind of put it down for a while because I thought, let me put this down because I was starting to lose that motivation that that Nick's talking about. But but helping Nick with his project, one of the things that I really appreciate about his relationship that he has with the director is that the director's a civilian, and I think that because the demographic of people that we're trying to reach is the other 99% of the world, because the military is only 1%. I think that it's really good that Nick, a military person, is speaking to a non-military director, because military people, we speak each other's language all day long. I know exactly what the hell he's trying to say. But when you have a civilian director who's putting all the pieces together for you, I think it's perfect, because it needs to be sent out so that other civilians understand what the hell Nick is trying to say. And so going back to what is this experience for me, it's very difficult too. And also it's really difficult because we don't have the support that I'm really surprised at the lack of support, to be honest with you, if we're being honest. I think that this project has the capacity to touch so many different aspects of the problems that we face in the military: suicide, sexual assaults, mental health. I mean, all the big areas. And I think that with the right support, with the right, I don't know, people like, what is it, Gary Sinise is his name? All these big name people that have really deep pockets that want to do so much for the military. And it's kind of like, you want to do something for us, help us communicate this problem, this huge problem, so that we can get a better support system from the other 98 or 99% of the population.
So why do you think it's a lack of support? Do you think that they're scared, or they don't want to touch it, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah, people are very scared, because everybody is so down to support the military. Home Depot will give you 10% off. Starbucks will give you a free cup of coffee once a year. But you ask for support because we're getting screwed over, and people are just like, oh man, that's tough. Good luck. Let me know how that works out for you. If you need anything, let me know. And then I reach out and I'm like, hey man, I need you. And they're just like, oh man, I don't really know, but I know somebody else, and then you just get kind of pawned off on all these other people. So right now what we're doing is just going down the line, because eventually we're going to talk to the right people who are going to be like, oh, we ain't scared of the military. We'll jump on this ship with you guys. We'll fucking pick up a sword and we'll go to battle with you. We need that energy, because this is a big project. You know, it's very David and Goliath, because the Department of Defense is huge, and they have so much money, and they will do everything in their power to keep, you know, making all that money that they're making on our labor, on our backs, on, you know, and at our lives' expense, really, is what it comes down to. So support is what we need.
Yeah, and one thing I would add there too is that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, the Gary Sinises of the world, the Wounded Warrior projects. So I mean, maybe another way to look at it is there's roughly 8,000 nonprofits in the United States alone that serve the veteran community. Okay, so that's a lot of organizations out there. The challenge is that those 8,000 are all fighting for the same pool of money, and so if you were able to consolidate 90% of those, there would be a lot more impact, at least in my opinion, within, you know, as far as addressing the issues of the veteran community. I mean, the one thing that's pretty fascinating though is why the hell is there 8,000 nonprofits in the United States that are trying to raise money to take care of injured veterans when their prior employer should be the ones taking care of their issues? But where I'm going with though is that when it comes to US JAG, one thing to keep in mind is that we are not an organization that serves the veteran community. We are the only organization that serves the active duty community in this capacity from forensic investigations. So a really good way to look at it is, and Crystal and I, we've talked about this in the past, but really what we're addressing here is the root cause of all of the issues that people see in the veteran community. You know, and one thing that we state is that, you know, the documentary, it's a story about injured active duty service members, a story detailing what happens to them before leaving the military. And when you take somebody's benefits when they're injured and then you throw them into the streets, which is effectively is happening, they have no support. And like I said earlier, they become the community's problem. And just to, you know, some people will say, well, this can't be that big of a problem. I mean, how big of a problem really is this? So I'll give you one big data point. And and this is a little dated, but it's going to give you some context though, because a lot of the people so in the Army alone, between 2004 and 2011, there were roughly 420,000 discharges, just generally speaking, all right? 160 or 38% were under less than honorable conditions. Think about that for a second. Nearly 40% of all the discharges, Army alone, 2004 to 2011, were under less than honorable conditions. And what does that mean? It means they're stripped of their benefits, their honor, their dignity, they have no help. And some people will say, well, they can go and get a, you know, upgrade, you know, through the VA, and they can become, you know, honorably discharged, and they'll eventually be able to get the benefits. And that's true. But that process takes years. And the first 2 years are the most critical for any military person after they exit to make sure that they find purpose again, which is the reason as to why suicides happen within the first 2 years of getting out.
Ooh.
I know, deep subject. I can see everybody's face. You're like, holy hell.
Well, I know personally, I've heard like, I used to hear stats, but I didn't like lock on to a particular number, but a number of our homeless people that are actually on the street across America happen to be veterans. So I was like,
about 20%.
Like, yeah, I was like, man, that's alarming. And then like with the number exploding, you would think, okay, you got to make a dent somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You think that the veteran community maybe would be the easiest thing to kind of, latch onto with all the different organizations and all the different people.
Yeah, and one of the the challenging things, and this is not just specific to veterans, it's pretty relevant within the homeless population in general. And there's a lot of mental health issues. And that leads, so basically you can't help somebody if they're not willing to be helped.
True.
And when somebody has major mental health issues, they're not thinking clearly. They're not having conversations like we are today. They're probably having conversations with some fictitious person sitting next to them. And that's a big problem. And so you want to help people, but you can only help somebody if they're willing to be helped. And that first starts out with them helping themselves.
Now, Crystal, I'm going to go back to you for a second. Since you're doing marketing for this film, how do you market a film about a subject matter that I guess most of the civilian world may not even think about, let alone know about?
Very soft. You have to have a soft delivery because it's such a tough topic to tackle. Like I said, everybody wants to support the military until it comes time to support the troops, like really support the troops. So what we've been doing is, we just recently started an Instagram page and we're doing little testimonials and stuff. Our first one that we had was an advocate talking about how, service members go off to war and they fulfill their duties, they report to duty, they do their jobs. A lot of these infantrymen that go to war, that see a lot of combat, a lot of them have children, and a lot of the things that they have to go through while they're at war is some of them have to injure or sometimes kill children because they're in the road, or they might be carrying a gun. I mean, you don't know what you're gonna run into out there. But they come back and then they have mental health problems, and they're afraid to get help because if you go to the behavioral health, even though the military tells you, oh no, we're not gonna reprimand you or we're not gonna punish you for that, they do. Because what happens is you go to mental health and you're like, I'm having a really hard time, and then like I said, they're criminalizing our mental health. So what they do is now they med board you, and you get med boarded out. And now if your problems that you were having, your mental health problems, lead to like alcohol addiction, okay, and then you get a DWI, and then you get arrested, and it's like, and now the military is like, oh, how dare you get a DWI, how dare you have any mental health problems, we're going to kick you out now. And that's where that other than honorable discharge comes in. So now this service member, I'll just make up a rank, a staff sergeant, gets kicked out of the Army, and now he has no benefits. So it's like, how do you pitch that to somebody, right? Because it pulls on America's heartstrings when you tell the story, but yet you still can't get people to do anything. They just do that. Oh man, that's tough. Oh man, that's too bad. How can we help? Everybody wants to help until it's time to help.
They just want to look at the glass window but not open it.
Yeah. And everybody's excited for the film. We've gotten great feedback from the film, really great feedback. But again, it's like, okay,
they don't want to touch it.
They don't want to touch it.
Well, you know what I was just thinking just now. I was like, okay, I know what the benefits are. I mean, because there's quite a bit, but it's like, does the civilian population even know what the benefits are? Do they know what getting a less than honorable or a dishonorable discharge? Do they know what that means?
No, they don't, and that's the main reason why, for the film, is because we want to explain it to people, just right down the line how it affects us, and also it's going to explain to America why we have this homeless veteran problem. I'm going to give you a really, really quick example of an abandoned veteran a female combat veteran was, she was right before she was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. She was in Germany because they go to, a lot of times the Army will send people to Germany for like, just it's like your pre-mobilization, and it's like a staging ground. Well, she was sexually assaulted in Germany right before going into Afghanistan. So she wasn't given any mental health treatment or anything. She did file a report. She filed a report for everything. So she goes to war, and she is she's part of the mortuary affairs detail. So it's her job to receive the bodies of dead service members.
Ooh.
So she does that for her whole deployment. Okay, so she saw a lot of death, a lot of death. Okay, on top of her already trauma from being assaulted in Germany. So when she comes home, she starts having a lot of mental health problems. She starts drinking very heavily. She got in trouble, and they discharged her, other than honorable discharge. Okay, she now loses her benefits, so now she can't get any help. She has no job. You can't get unemployment benefits when you're collecting VA. Okay, so now what this does is this puts the veteran in a really shitty situation, because like now it's like, well, now what do I do? It's a death sentence is what it is. So she got in trouble. She got arrested. She served her time. Okay, it was like a drug charge. Served her time, and when she got out, she was deported to Costa Rica because she was actually serving in the armed forces on a green card. So, I mean, imagine the betrayal that person feels, that female feels, right? Wow, I went and I served for a country that like really I didn't even really necessarily belong to. Served, deploys, and gets out, has problems, and is just kicked to the curb. She's still deployed. I mean, not deployed, deported. She's been in Costa Rica for 9 years, away from her kids.
That's crazy.
And yeah, so like, talk about being abandoned, right? Like, wow, I went and served my country for you. You guys didn't offer her any of the mental health support that she needed after being assaulted. They just threw her right into a war. Just threw her right into war. And the trauma, and there's a lot of research now going around about like just the trauma. I mean, that takes like 7 to 10 years to get over that type of trauma. And a lot of the service members are dealing with that. A lot of our Afghanistan and Iraq GWAT vets from the 2007, 2009 period, all that whole time frame, they're having a lot of problems right now. They're struggling because they're feeling like, wow, like Nick was talking about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They're feeling like, wow, was that all for nothing? I mean, they lost friends, they lost limbs, they lost themselves.
So do you feel like a will be considered a success of this film would be kind of reshaping the general population's view of the military?
Yes, because I think what it'll do, it'll put more pressure on the leadership to start, I guess, maybe being a little bit better in their decision-making process, because now they know the whole world is watching. I think that the military has been unsupervised for so long because everybody just assumes that, oh, it's the military, they've got their together. When in fact, no, we don't. Not at all.
Okay, Nick, would you want to expand on that as well?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. But there's a couple comments that I just wanted to make. And, Crystal mentioned that female that was deported to Puerto Rico, I do believe you said. And
Costa Rica.
Okay. And that's not an uncommon thing, because we just worked a case when I was referencing actually Syria, and one of our client in that, he was from the Dominican Republic, and they, other than honorably discharged him, And not only did they do that, but they also put his paperwork in to be deported back to the Dominican Republic with a wife, a 4-year-old son, and the wife happens to be in her 3rd trimester at the time. So it's not an uncommon thing to have happen. Now, with that being said, I think one point that should be made up, and Crystal spoke about this a second ago, about how it's unchecked power, more or less. So a good example would be, there was legislation that we worked with Congress to get passed through the National Defense Authorization Act a number of years ago. And it effectively said that if a service member's behavioral issues or infractions were a direct result of their injuries, then they cannot be used against them in an administrative or judicial proceeding. All right. So there are protections out there for these service members, because the chain of events is a soldier goes to war, they come home damaged. The typical solution is to put them on medications. Medications have adverse side effects. Adverse side effects result in behavioral issues. Behavioral issues result in minor infractions. Then they use those minor infractions to take a service member out of the med board process, put them into a chapter process, and that can take about 2 weeks. And then they're, other than all, be discharged, as opposed to a medical board proceeding, which can take up to a year in some cases. So that's a clear example as to why there needs to be third-party oversight. And all we're asking is just follow the damn policies and procedures. Do what's right. But the reality is that they're not following the policy and procedures because nobody's making them. But more importantly, and sadly, they know the ramifications of them doing this to these injured service members. They know the fallout, and the reality is that they don't care. They simply don't care. And a part of it is a cultural problem. So a good example, we're going to go all the way back to 1963, all right? But it's a good example, and it's President Kennedy. Now, President Kennedy, the day that he got assassinated, the Secret Service was saying, we need to put the bubble on the car. We need to put the bubble on the car. JFK said, no, I want to be more friendly, and act like, people could see me and things of that nature. Well, at that point in time, the culture in the Secret Service was that the president gets the final call. And then he got shot and he died. After that, the culture in the Secret Service changed as to where they take precedent. The president can't override them in most situations, that being one. And the same thing is happening within the military as to where it goes back to leadership. This is the way that today's leaders were trained by yesterday's leaders. And this is how tomorrow's leaders are being trained by today's leader. So it's a cultural issue. And Crystal and I, we've talked about that quite a bit as to what's happening there. So this is something that's not going to change overnight. That's for sure. But we're taking that first step and making sure that some action does take place, though.
Now,
and really, what it is too. Sorry, Kevin.
No, go ahead.
Interrupt you. What it is too is we're showing people how the Department of Defense is breaking their own rules. They're breaking their own rules. They're violating their own policies. They're allowing their field grade officers, general officers, to break the law. There's no accountability at the top. And this is just really what the movie comes down to, is just showing them how they're breaking their own rules.
Yeah, and I would also add too, it's not just commanders. And so we go back to the why, how, why. Well, the primary reason as to why they're doing it is because of money. It's money, or it's to silence or discredit somebody. Okay? So take the Syria case. All right, that gentleman, he saw a lot of things over there that the Marines did wrong, He had a lot of information. So did the other guys. But not only did they go the extra length to not dishonor him, but other than not only discharge him out of the military, they went as far as deporting the guy or attempting to deport him. When it comes to the how are they doing this? It's not just commanders. I'll tell you one thing, and we have the receipts for this. It's medical doctors inside the DoD that are colluding with command, and it includes intentionally misdiagnosing. It includes changing diagnoses to fit the narrative of the command. It includes, I gotta be careful here, but let's just say that there's some nefarious things that are taking place, and there's definitely medical malpractice happening inside of the DoD when it comes to the doctors. They are a part of the problem.
Yeah, it's the abuse of authority for me.
This goes deep.
Real deep.
It does.
So when
We're scratching the surface right now, I tell you that.
So the people you've gotten for these testimonials, the people you got? They're more, I guess, from modern day Army, or have you gotten people who've been maybe in the Army in maybe the 60s or 70s? Like, how far back do you go as far as people you've talked to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's people from the Vietnam era. One individual that was conducting operations in Laos, even though we weren't technically in Laos, but that person is a part of this. Other people that were fighter pilots in the Vietnam War that now present day focus on traumatic brain injury and the effects of traumatic brain injury, which is much more prevalent today than it was opposed to the Vietnam era or even Gulf War I. A lot of that has to deal with the IEDs that have been used in the global war on terror, the GWAT, as some people refer to it as. Journalists that we have worked with throughout the last 15 years who have done stories, who have done exposés, they're a part of this. And then I mentioned the confidential informants that we have inside of the Department of Defense, present day, that we get intel from. They are going on the record. Now, their identities will be concealed, and we're going to protect them.
Okay, because I was going to ask that.
Yeah. So but that's the thing too, is that you have to surround yourself with people that are more talented than you. And I think probably your experiences in the film world, you probably understand that better than most people. And so the plan that's been put in place, it's not just something that I started Googling online going, oh, this looks good, that looks good. These actions that we're taking are from the people inside the machine that know how the sausage is made and know what we're up against and knows how to navigate, but also circumvent. I wouldn't even call it bureaucracy. I would call circumventing the corruption. That's a better way to put it.
As we wrap this up, I wanted to ask, and I guess this can go for both of you. Tell people, why should they watch the film Abandoned when it is finally released? Nick, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. I'm glad you actually brought that up, because it's something I wanted to mention earlier. So I think maybe a better way I would phrase it is why should people care? And the reality is that every single person in this country should care, whether you served or not, because this problem affects you personally, whether you know it or not. Because if you look at when they take these service members and they strip them of everything, they throw them into the communities, they now effectively become the community's problem. They eat up resources. Incarceration is through the roof. Homelessness is through the roof. Drug addiction, spousal abuse, suicide, all of those things. is something that affects every single individual's daily life. You just don't know it yet. And that's effectively what we're attempting to do with this, is because it all goes back to, why should I care about this? Well, now we're going to tell them. And we're just not going to tell them, we're going to show them.
All right, and Crystal?
I mean, that's it. It's, I mean, Nick said it perfectly. You know, it's, no, everybody thinks, oh, well, I'm not in the military, this doesn't impact me. It does impact you, because the other thing too is, if a lot of good leadership is being pushed out because they're being stonewalled, and what's left is this toxic environment, these toxic leaders. You know, look at what's going down. Look at Fort Hood. I mean, Fort Hood is so corrupt, it's like, it's not even funny. But they've gotten so far away from the problem, and they've let it get so bad that the good order and discipline that is required of a military to work to its full capacity is not there anymore. So why should America care? Well, I'm sorry, but you know, we're talking about the defenders of your nation. So who do you want serving? Who do you want defending your nation? Strong leaders, or these corrupt fools? I mean, that's the best way to say it, you know? I mean, I'm a little concerned, you know, I mean, especially in the world that we live in of digital, you know, IA, we've got technology that is taking over. I mean, right now the world runs on TikTok. Who's TikTok made by? China. So who's on TikTok? Military people.
And kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Military people and kids. So the next generation.
Yeah. That's the thing about it, yeah.